The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everyone to the first of 3 webinars in our CMO Challenge series in association with our partners Domo. This is the CMO Challenge and we're asking today, does it really work? My name is Naomi Taylor and I'll be your host, and I'm joined by the fantastic Jason Birdby, who I believe is probably just woken up out on the West Coast in Portland. So thanks for joining us, Jason. I hope you have a really
You
strong
bet.
coffee by your side. So at the Drum, we're constantly reporting and speaking with chief marketing officers, and increasingly we're hearing, life isn't all ha ha he he. It's not an easy time for CMOs who are constantly responding to changes in the industry, from new technologies, complications in adland, and constantly changing consumer behaviour. It's a time of constant transformation and increasing uncertainty. And there really needs to be something that brings it all together for CMOs to make it easier for them to run their businesses properly, efficiently, and successfully. That's normally a marketing strategy. And today we want to ask you guys if you think it's really working for you. We're really lucky to be joined by Jason, who in a past life previously served as president of WPP's digital agency Possible. He's an author and frequent speaker on helping companies shift their culture to take advantage of data that improves the success of their organizations. And he's now Chief Customer Success Officer at Domo, where he's ensuring that people are making the most of their marketing and driving their businesses through the platform. So it's really, really great to have you, Jason. Thank you for waking up. So before we kick off, we have a few housekeeping rules. We like to run really interactive webinars, so there is a chat box at the side on your control panel, and if you have any questions, please pop them in and we can ask at the end. The webinar will also be recorded, so if you have to dash off to a meeting or go and fight some fires or eat a sandwich, don't worry, we'll be putting this online and you can get it on catch up on thedrum.com. So Jason, before I hand over the control to you, it'd be really good to kick off today's talk by asking you what you think the biggest problem facing CMOs is today.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for having me, Naomi. I think it's, and this is really what the webinar is based on, is there are so many choices, so many ways in which CMOs and marketing departments and agencies can spend dollars. I think the biggest challenge is knowing where to spend it, what to prioritize, and what's going to drive the business forward. So if you think about it, the options that we have today in terms of where we connect with our target audience, our customers, are endless compared to what they were even 10, 15 years ago. And so that makes the challenge of a CMO and of all of us as marketers really challenging. I think that's the number one thing, which is one of the reasons why we wrote this book, was looking at, with all of those options, how do you know what works, what's working, and where you should spend an incremental dollar, or what dollars you should free up by focusing less on things that aren't performing for you. And so that is what I would say is the biggest issue they're facing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful. All right. So I will go. We're going to be sharing some videos today. I will make sure that everyone there we go. Okay. We're going to be sharing some videos today, so those will be playing. We've got a number of examples that I think bring the book to life and bring some of the principles to life. And so as we move through this, I'm going to talk about a number of key things that we found really drive digital marketing and really help marketers understand and brands understand where are the dollars you're spending, are the initiatives you're focusing on working. As Naomi said, my name is Jason Birdby. I'm the Chief Customer Success Officer for Domo. Came from a career in agency where I spent 17 years and recently joined Domo about a year ago. I've always been very passionate about data, not from a technical statistician sense, but more of how can we help get business people better using data to make decisions, and how can we all be better at our jobs based on leveraging data? So we set out a while back to look at and understand what does drive great marketing? What are the commonalities between that to make people successful in digital marketing? And we chose to write a book, which may have seemed unique for a digital agency to do, and being someone in digital. But what we had to do is gather all of our ideas, and we did a number of things. We talked to a number of colleagues. We did about 100 thought leadership interviews around the world with thought leaders. We commissioned a Forrester study. We collected a number of people from within WPP to look at and really understand around the world what were the commonalities of driving success, how were people using data to make decisions, and we came up with 10 principles, and we're gonna talk through those. But before we talk through those, I wanted to dig in and really look at an example of does it work from the standpoint of a big successful campaign, and looking at it gets a bunch of attention, a bunch of interest, but does it really work? Some of you may have seen this campaign. I'm going to start and play it, and then we're going to jump into a couple of the principles from the book. So I'm going to switch over to video now. Hang with me for one moment. All right, here we go. So not sure how many folks saw that when it came out. It was something I was definitely proud to be part of, and proud of the team that put that together. But when we think about it, that generated over 90 million views online relatively quickly. The team was excited, that the client was excited, but the question is, did it move the needle at all for the company? And I would typically ask at this point for a show of hands of how many people caught what brand that might possibly be for. And usually the answer to that is very few people necessarily know the brand that it was for. It was for a Microsoft initiative. It was for Microsoft Office and helping drive the product OneNote. And the big question there is, we can all get really excited. We can get really excited about the 90 million views online, but does it help Microsoft accomplish their goals? Does it help Microsoft drive to what they're doing? So news comes out, a bunch of media comes out. We get a lot of press on it. Everyone's very excited about it. But that question comes back: does it work? Now, this video was just one part of an overall campaign around the collective project. And the main idea here was they were trying to get the attention of younger college students. We did a study, and the study we found was that students would use, typically they weren't using Microsoft Office, they were using Google Docs, they were using different tools. And then right before they turned it in, they would switch it over to Microsoft Word because that's what their professor would ask them to turn it in that format. And so the idea was, how do we get the attention of college students, a younger audience, to make Microsoft relevant to them? We believe that if we had gone in and forced it down their throat and really looked at Microsoft in your face, it immediately would have turned off that audience. So we tried a different way. And so once we had success with this, we had a number of different touch points we had 3 different campaigns that all featured university students. This one was Albert with the robotic arms. We were able to take this and figure out, okay, now how do we begin to turn the corner on Microsoft and get them to understand it? So again, 90 million views online, all sorts of press, but did it work? The only way to know if it worked was to make sure we had clear objectives out of the gate. So we wanted to make a connection with the student audience, number one. Our second goal was raising awareness of OneNote in Office. And the third was getting students involved in our product. So those are the 3 things we were trying to do. We do come back to the same question though, did it work? And what we were able to find was we hit the goals, we exceeded, and we'll talk about how. We connected, we had 90 million connections. That was that first one, the reach of 2.25, exceeded the goal by 9x. And then the last one, usage was through the roof. And this was through trials and downloads and different things of getting people to engage in the content. And the way in which we did that was campaigns after that initial explosion of the Robert Downey Jr. video. We were able to find and identify, using data, different points within that video that touched people and got people excited, and really were more emotional for people. And there were 2 specific parts where sentiment went really, really high on it. One was when they fist bumped, and the other was when Robert Downey Jr. and the young boy were holding hands. And so what we were able to do is just through simple retargeting, we picked a couple pieces of that out and then slowly started retargeting back to those folks, letting them see what those elements, talking about OneNote and slowly introducing the backstory of how this amazing college student is building these robotic arms and being able to deliver them all over the world to a number of different people. And so by doing that and slowly introducing it and getting people more and more involved, we were able to exceed that usage goal, which was so important. The interesting thing though is you could have just left it. Everyone would have been really excited with that idea of, wow, 90 million views, 90 million views, 90 million views. Everyone would have celebrated that. Someone could have gotten promoted and it may not have made much of a difference to Microsoft at all. Whereas by turning the corner and really understanding it, we were able to do that. One thing I always love sharing, and proud of this as well, is this triggered also requests for some of these robotic arms from this college student, 1,000-fold increase in donations, which was a wonderful thing as well. It was not what we were setting out to do, but it was a wonderful thing both for the clients and the team to feel that they were making an impact beyond just the business goals that were also exceeded. So wanted to start with that again, and I think that the word of warning on all of this is, let's make sure we're celebrating the right things. 90 million views is exciting, but let's make sure we're celebrating the other elements that are really important. So as we did the book, as we did our study, as we did our work, we went through and we ended up landing on these 10 principles. And the 10 principles, we're going to just focus on a couple of them today that we agreed with the Drum and Naomi were most applicable to this audience and what we were looking at. I'd encourage anyone to, if you want to read through and skim the other ones, I think it could be helpful as well. But the 10 principles we came up with are the following. Number one, business goals are everything. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on this one. This is one of the ones we're going to dive into, and it's really about before a campaign, before initiative, before we spend dollars, defining what success looks like and making sure we stick to that. The second is a collective vision. We're also going to talk about that one a fair amount. That is getting alignment across teams. The third, one of my favorites, is data inspires creativity, and that looks at how do we make sure we're positioning data to drive creativity, not as a limiter of creativity. We're also going to talk about that one. Number four is finding unicorns, and this is about finding people that are multidimensional, people that are amazing designers, but also understand the value in data, or can understand both brand as well as campaign. People that play more than one role, understand, are curious about one role, how you identify those people and how you inspire those people to continue growing. Number 5 is culture predicts success and failure. That is one we're really passionate about, that is about the culture of within an organization, within a team, allowing people to take chances. The 6th one is another one we're also going to touch on today, which is measure what matters. And that's the idea of avoiding vanity metrics, avoiding things that we just believe are easy to get data, or that we're always seeing data or always seeing metrics, but they're not actionable. How do we measure what matters? Number 7 is what it's worth. And that is looking at understanding what is the value of different behaviors to an organization. So what is the value of one incremental lead? Or what does it mean when someone goes and test drives a car? Really understanding value. The 8th principle is never stop improving. The idea of constant optimization, change, improvement. Number 9 is one size fits no one. The idea of we can't think of people in these great big categories as we have in the past. Example I like to use is female is not a segment or a category. There are many different, while females may be different than males in some ways, there's tons of different ways that females are different from each other. And so the idea of we can't lump everyone into these giant buckets and think that things are going to work for them, very often you get stuck with something that works for no one by trying to be generic. And then the 10th and final principle was about framework for innovation, of how do you build teams to drive innovation. So the 4 we're going to focus on today are business goals are everything, a collective vision, data inspires creativity, and measure what matters. So we're going to go through each of those now. First one is business goals are everything. This is intentionally the first principle of the book because it is the foundation for everything. I'm going to show another short video here, and then we're going to talk about what that means, why it matters, and then a couple of tools in which people can take away and start using. So we will switch over to the video now. Here we go. So when we think about goals, I think that video brings it home. The idea of let's agree, let's align on what those are. Let's define those up front and not jump right to potential measurements. So an example of that would be we're not going for views, we're not going for clicks, but what is the outcome of those? What are we trying to drive behind those views and clicks? What are the behaviors? And then looking at those, you'll see on the screen right now. This is a view. This is within Domo. You can see in that pink area in the middle, we are looking at reach, and that is looking at what percentage of the goal for that. You can look to tie different elements in here, and then behind us you can dig into different campaigns to understand what we are trying to do, what we're looking at doing, and so forth. Another example is I will share here is on the left, you will see, and on the right you're seeing it as well. You're seeing specific goals and metrics for different things. On the left, we're looking at units sold by region, and you can see the target, you can see the average, you can see where we're looking, you've got it by region. And so the ability to have this information and constantly be looking at the variance to those goals of what's driving it becomes really important. So if we know, we had an example a number of years ago where we were really excited about a campaign success, the numbers were very big. We hadn't necessarily, and we fixed this, we hadn't necessarily aligned with our client of what they viewed success as. We agreed on what we were measuring and what we were trying to do, but our targets were a little bit different. We were excited with 1 million, they were looking for 3 million. And so that simple idea of making sure we're all focusing on the same thing becomes very important. So why does it matter? And when we look at business goals or everything, why does it matter to set these goals up front? The first thing is alignment, making sure we're all working together. The second thing is expectations, back to the idea of making sure that as counterparts, and whether it's agency, brand relationship, that we're looking at and our expectations are aligned. The third is focus, and the fourth is accountability. The focus one is really interesting from the standpoint of if you've got 5 goals they're trying to do, and back to a CMO having so many different choices, if you're constantly being bombarded with new options, new ideas, new suggestions, one of the ways in which you can filter and control those is looking at which of those align to your 5 goals. And if they don't, if a new idea comes in and it doesn't align, it's not driving one of your 5 goals, one of 2 things happens. Either means you shouldn't focus on it, it's not important, or is there a chance you need to revisit your goals because you're missing something? Most of the time, the first one rather than the second, but it's that idea of really helping drive focus. So I'm often asked, well, where do we start with this? What do we do with that? And the first thing that in terms of takeaways is demand goals up front. So before something is launched, before a campaign, agree on what those primary goals are and what those targets are for it. Lead by example. If within your organization it's not doing it, on your next initiative, try to do it. Continue talking about those goals through an initiative. So if something is launching, every time you're showing an update on it, every time you're showing creative, talk about the behavior we're driving. Focus on both immediate and long-term success in terms of measurements. There could be different goals, measurements, and so forth for something right away, as well as something we want to do over a year or 2 period, and then reward success. When people go out and beat those goals and crush them and are defining them, reward them in some way. That doesn't always need to be dollars. So principle 2 is a collective vision. Again, we're going to jump over to another short video to bring this together. But collective vision is really about working together. Go ahead and start the video now. So that one always scares me when you think about having a bad day. That is a really, really bad day. And the idea behind collective vision, again, is getting everyone working together, everyone moving in the same direction. This is an example of a theme park. This is an example of using data based on where people are in a theme park. And the way this particular company uses this is based on where large lines are, where larger crowds are. They can redirect and move people through the theme park in different ways. They may put a band up or redirect people through a parade or some characters into an area that is a little less crowded. They will also take areas that are very crowded at any given time and send more services in there to make sure the bathrooms, the facilities are clean, to make sure everything is stocked up in terms of what they're able to sell, refreshments and so forth. And so it's one way in which they can get everyone working together to make the experience better for people, in this case, visiting the theme park. But when you think about a collective vision and the importance of it, it can seem very basic, but what we saw again and again is within organizations, people would be moving in different directions. So why does it matter? It gets everyone moving in the same direction. We're using the same definitions where instead of people calling something similar, very different words, or using the same words to describe different things, we can get people aligned on what that thinking is. Gets us focusing on the same outcome and the same measurements. So for all of these, if you think about it, if you go around a room and a team on a campaign, and let's say whether you're an agency or a brand and you're working on a large campaign, halfway through, if you ask the 10 people involved in it, 5 on the agency, 5 on the brand side, tell me about the goal, or what are we really trying to do here? A lot of times the highest surface level description, you may see some similarities. But when you get down granular, what you'll find is that what people are talking about, thinking about, become very different. Or as you move through a given project, people may be aligned at the beginning and understand, but as new ideas come up, as people switch out, whatever it may be, you may find that you start to get further and further apart of what the overall goal is and what the overall area we're focusing on. So how do you get started with this and ensure you have a collective vision? One is gathering the stakeholders. That is upfront and ongoing, getting everyone together, aligning on a strategy, documenting the strategy and what success looks like, and then that ongoing confirmation, going back and saying, what is it specifically that we're trying to do, and making sure we're still working towards that. An example of that I try to use every day with my teams, I run our client services groups within Domo, which is about 150 people, and we have 4 primary goals across all 5 of the different groups I run. And every single leadership meeting we start with, I'm reviewing those 4 goals. Remember, we're trying to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I use every opportunity I get when new ideas come up, new initiatives come up, new things come up that we can be doing, is making sure we're focused on, does it fall within one of those 4? Is it going to drive it? It's amazing, just a simple thing like that can redirect people when they come with ideas or things of why aren't we doing, or should we do this? Figuring out where does it fit within these. If it drives a couple of them, it gets more attention. And then I have cards set up in Domo where I look at the overall goals of my group and then what data I'm looking at against those 4 goals. And then the gentleman that runs consulting for me has a page for him that has my 4 goals and how consulting rolls up to them, and then what cards they look at. That's something I'm looking at with him on a regular basis. And so we're constantly reinforcing, this is what we're doing, here's how we're working together. And it can get different groups that may not have a ton of overlap, and I'm talking about my groups, different groups that may not have a ton of overlap, automatically having connection points, which is something I like. So again, would encourage all of you to align on that strategy, document it so it can be shared, and then confirm that on an ongoing basis. So the third one is data inspires creativity. And this came about in a few ways, and there's been a few things that, and the great thing is has changed and is continuing to change and shift. But early on, if you go back even just a few years ago, a lot of creatives would feel very threatened by data, or they would feel that data was trying to tell them what to do. And there was a famous thing that happened at Google where someone quit and was really frustrated and did a big post about Google had gone too far into data, which I will not argue. I'm not going to get into that debate. But the idea of, if data is used correctly, and if creatives are open to data and it's positioned correctly and it's focusing on what the goals are, we've found that data can actually inspire creativity and allow you to take greater chances and break out of some of the commonalities that folks can get stuck into. So I'm going to start another short video on this one. and we will talk through how to put this to work and what it means coming out of it. So we've seen this again and again when creatives start talking about data as they're presenting great ideas. They end up going a lot further. If you can present a brilliant idea that's going to solve a brand's problems, that's wonderful. But when you can do it and back it up with data, it becomes just that much more powerful. We've seen again and again where when you are able to bring some of that together, you can often push outside of a comfort zone that a CMO may have, that a brand manager may have, whoever it may be, to try something new and to really push the envelope, which I think is something exciting that we all look at. Here's an example of between a couple of global brands where they were looking at understanding what young children were looking at, what they were responding to in terms of television shows. And what was discovered is Disney was behind Nick Jr. in this case on in terms of this audience. And one of the big things was this show, which I had not heard of before, this called Paw Patrol. And they looked in and were able to understand what were kids most responding to, and they were really responding to these animals. And Disney was able to look at that, create a show, sorry about that, I accidentally forwarded the slide, create a show and begin to get in and understand how can we better get this younger audience and inspire them and get them excited about what they're doing. Now, if someone had just gone in and said, we want to do puppy dog pals, and here's the concept and here's the idea, that could have in fact worked for them and someone could have gotten approval on that. But the idea they were able to get in and show that this was really resonating with this younger audience that they were getting crushed in allowed them to have a much better story. This is just another example of using data. This is within, you can see it's using some Nielsen ratings. This is within, this is a view within Domo. So as we look at why does this matter, a few things. Data as an enabler, not a limiter. So you use data to really drive and allow you to do the second thing, which is push the envelope. It also gives you a greater chance of success. If we have a great idea, that's one thing. But if we have a great idea that's really rooted in data, our chance of success goes way up. And we're listening to the voice of the customer. We're understanding what is out there. That doesn't mean we take what the customer always wants and does it, because in some cases what we may be doing is we may be identifying early trends of what we believe the customer will want. And that is just as important and arguably more powerful when we bring that up, because you're going against what's happening today while looking to see what's going to happen in the future. And that can be a really positive element. So how do we do that? How do we take within our own organizations and get people comfortable with the idea of data inspiring creativity? One is get the groups talking, whether it's in UX, whether it's in your data group, whether it's in your creatives. How do you get them talking, working together, and involved early on? Don't just pull the data people in at the end after something launches. Get them involved early on and see how they can maybe uncover something that they can hand off helpful to the teams, to your strategists, whoever it may be. We want to train the teams. We want to hire unicorns, the idea of people that are multidimensional, who aren't so set in their ways of I only do this, that can really branch outside of things. Incentivize, and it shows currency here, but it can be anything. The idea of incentivizing working together, incentivizing the celebration when teams are working together, and reward collaboration. One of the things that I would always know we were in a good spot is if we were either in a pitch or sharing an idea or whatever it may be, is when our head creative was sharing a data point, and in a conversation in front of a customer, in front of a client, in a conversation about some of the data work they did together and what they identified and what it drove. So that idea of rewarding collaboration when it's working. Now on to our last principle number 6 of measuring what matters. This is a fun one for those of you based in the UK. So one of these examples in particular may be familiar to you. This is the idea of let's make sure we're focusing on measuring the right things. So I'm going to switch over to the video here, and we will. This will be the last video I share. We will get this going shortly, and then do the same thing where we talk through how to put some of this to work. So I love that. I love the Measure What Matters campaign. My children had the song on their phones and played the game and everything else. We started our book off with this. McGraw-Hill was our publisher. We started the book off with this, and McGraw-Hill was not necessarily a fan of us calling out a campaign right out of the gate. The reason we looked at these two campaigns is, unlike a lot of campaigns out there, the information is not public. We do not know everything behind it. In this case, we do. They were both PSAs. They both relied on government statistics and data, so we could get in and gather all that data and dig in really deep. We had 10 different independent individuals analyze and look at causation, correlation, changes over time to get this, which we had to do to make to get our publisher comfortable. There's about an 8-page appendix in the book that our publisher made us put in to go through and describe the why, that in fact our findings on that, if anyone's curious to look through that. But what I love about that is again back to the idea of what is really driving the desired behavior. Was the desired behavior for Dumb Ways to Die It surely wasn't views. It surely wasn't impressions. It shouldn't have been winning a Cannes Lion award, which it won many of. It should have been really the idea of reducing deaths and reducing injury of folks around these trains in a very specific area. So should you be proud if you worked on that campaign? I would be excited. It took off. It did a bunch of exciting things. What it didn't do was change the behavior it set out to do. So from that standpoint, it wasn't necessarily successful or correct. And I think part of it comes back to, what are we celebrating? What are we measuring? What really matters? And so as we look at this is another example within Domo of what we look at, what we can see. This is focusing in on a few behaviors for key sales reps, average deal size, demo, growth sales, leads. Goes on where it looks at how can we make sure we're measuring everyone in the same way on what matters. In this case, this is the currency for sales reps, but really focusing in on some of these elements. You can see another example here within mobile where someone that oversees these reps can look in and see exactly how everyone's doing. Now, the other thing that I love about this example is being able to come in and say, if you're Alex Howe down on the bottom right, you could go to Lance Rivas at the very top and say, hey, Lance, what are you doing? Are there tips? Are there things you could be doing? Or maybe you're number 50 on this list and you want to go to any of the top 5 and say, what are the things that you're doing that are helping drive your success and allows you to learn from each other, because we have this consistent measurement and the ability to get in and really see how we compare to each other. So when we look at measure what matters, why does it matter? Well, it allows us to focus on the business impact. Back to the CMO with the question that Naomi asked at the top. When we look at what their biggest challenges is, they've got so many choices and so many options and so many things to do. They're not focusing on the business impact and what really is going to drive the business, then they're going to continue to be bouncing around and looking at different things. We also need to avoid vanity metrics. Avoid the vanity metrics that automatically pop up that vendors may give you in terms of impressions or other things, or vanity metrics that tools may automatically give you, and always start with what is the business impact, what is the goal we're trying to do, and then create it off of there, and then measure it off of there so we can improve it. And the last thing is defining success up front. When we talk about measuring what matters, we must have success defined up front. We must define what those measurements are up front so we know if we're successful. So how do you get started? I would encourage any of you that are interested in this one in particular, go back and look at your current initiatives. Do you have goals defined, and do you have those supporting metrics underneath that really matter to those that are really tied for those? Look for defined success metrics in your creative briefs, whatever it may be. Establish those targets up front and hold teams to those upfront goals. One thing that I always look to watch for is, do we define something up front? Do we define what success looks like? And then do we report back out at the end on against those? It's really easy to take any, and we could have done it for the Robert Downey Jr. example. We could have taken that and said, you know what, success was purely reach because we killed it on the reach side. So the idea of hold the team accountable to those upfront goals, don't allow for the crafting of revising success post data, because that anyone can go through and cherry pick metrics. Really got to nail those up front. So those were the 4 principles we wanted to talk through today. I would encourage anyone, if you want to look through and read through some of this, if any of it's interested, go for it. If we were in person, I usually have 2 or 3 of these. My mom bought about 1,000 of them when they came out, so I've got her basement's full of them. So if it was easier, I would mail some out to a few. But if you find it interesting, go ahead and grab it. Otherwise, take what's in here and think about it, and think about how you can make it work for your organization. I know this is the first of a webinar series around some of the things we're doing at Domo, how our customers are doing it. You can see the second one comes up on November 12th. That is with Chris Fender, the head of data and analytics with L'Oreal. And then we have Mark Johnston talking about making your data work for you. That's going to be a really exciting one about how a bunch of different companies are using this data and making it work. I will say, being an agency guy my entire career until a year ago, I've been very impressed with what I can do within Domo. It's the reason I joined, is because of this gap of people being able to measure things, see things in real time. I've got all of my data on the phone. And I can really get in and understand how my part of the business is performing, how it's performing against our goals, and what actions I can take on it. So that's my little pitch for Domo. but would encourage those of you that have interest to continue through the webinar series and continue to learn. So with that, I think, Naomi, do I turn it back over to you, or are you just going to jump in with questions?
We're all good. Yeah, I think it's time for questions. Yeah, thank you so much. That was really, really informative. Thought it was really helpful going through all the different, business goals, collective vision, data, and then measuring what really matters. So thank you for that. So the question box is just at the side, so feel free to pop them in now, and I can go through some. The first one, Jason, is actually relating to your agency experience, and actually looking at what opportunities do agencies have when they're looking to create a unified platform to share data with their clients and publishers. What are the opportunities there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about it a few ways. The way earlier in my career, I would think about it is you want to be delivering the information to your client, even if the information is not great news. So I would always push for us to let's align on the goals, and even if we miss it, let's share that right away. And by sharing that right away, what allows us to do is pivot and improve upon that. But I think one of the fears is if we share bad news, is the client going to be upset? They may in fact be, but at some point they're going to find out if we're not successful. And I'd rather be the one to bring it to them and say, you know what, we missed the mark on this, but here's what we're going to do to improve upon it. So I think having that back and forth dialogue and not being afraid to share bad news and share it early if we're missing something, and then tweak and tune that. Now on the agency side, what I would want to do is make sure all of my agencies are fully aligned on what our goals are and how we're going to measure success on that. One of the things that I know frustrates a lot of CMOs is if they have 5 agencies and they get reports back from their 5 agencies that say, here's how we're doing within a given campaign, and you add all of the results up, a lot of times it may equal 150% of reality because there's all sorts of overlap, different issues. Sometimes it equals 400% of reality. And so the idea of trying to get all those agencies working together, what we found to work successful is you have to have them focusing on the same metrics, agreed in the right way, and doing one common story about the impact. Obviously, a bunch of agencies and brands use Domo for that. But that idea of how do you get everyone together telling the same story, and if I'm a client, if I'm a brand, I'm really pushing on that very hard. What are the goals, metrics, and how are we make sure we're fully aligned on that?
Brilliant, thank you for that. And another one that's comes through is looking more at when we were going through looking at how data is inspiring creativity. What do you think that there's a balance that needs to be struck when you're looking at data for performance measurement and data for creativity?
Absolutely. The data for performance can be more of these elements, and it's showing how we did. When you talk about creativity, this can be going out and uncovering trends, uncovering certain things, understanding how people are thinking and feeling. You don't necessarily, when you're looking at data that's going to drive creativity, it isn't as black and white. It isn't as absolute. It's not going to give you an answer of thumbs up or thumbs down. It's going to give you information. So I think of that, and that's where I love to see, whether it's a creative and a data person working together to understand, hey, what are some of the things we want to go out and look at and uncover and understand? And then going back and forth. It's not just a big data dump or delivery over to a creative saying, here's 50 charts and a bunch of cards or data that you can see. It's more of that ongoing conversation. So I see those two being really different in how you do it. And ideally, it's a collaboration. And that's where that takes a special type of creative. That also takes a special type of data person, not necessarily someone that's in writing complex SQL queries heads down in data. And that's what we talk about when we talk about unicorns.
Brilliant.
Otherwise, they're speaking completely different language.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. I think that's all we have time for today. And I'd just like to thank you to our partner, Domo. Our next webinar in the series, as Jason mentioned, will be on the 12th of November, and we're really lucky to be able to chat to L'Oreal's Chris Fender, who's going to be discussing how L'Oreal's been redefined and clarified its strategy to maximise its ROI. And as I said before, you can catch up with any of our webinars online on thedrum.com. And that is us. Thank you very much and have a great day. And Jason, I hope you can go and have some breakfast now and have a good one.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you for having Domo and myself join today.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.